I've been driving trucks for over 2 decades, and I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night on Route 66. It was a crisp autumn evening, and I was hauling a load of electronics from Chicago to Los Angeles. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving me alone with the hypnotic white lines of the highway and the soft glow of my dashboard lights. I'd been driving for hours, and fatigue was starting to set in. The radio crackled with static, and I flipped through the stations, hoping to find something to keep me alert. That's when I first noticed it, a faint whisper beneath the white noise. "Help me." I shook my head, convinced it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Please. Help me." I pulled over to the shoulder, my heart racing. The voice seemed to be coming from the back of my trailer, but that was impossible. I checked the cargo myself before leaving Chicago. There was no way anyone could be back there. As I stepped out of the cab, the cool night air hit me like a slap to the face. The highway stretched out before me, empty in both directions. The only sound was the soft ping of my engine cooling down. I walked around to the back of the trailer, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My hand trembled as I reached for the latch. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" No response. I took a deep breath and swung the doors open. The beam of my flashlight swept across the neatly stacked pallets of electronics. Nothing out of place. No stowaways. No source for the mysterious voice. As I turned to head back to the cab, a cold wind whipped past me, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins. That's when I saw her. A young woman stood by the side of the road, her pale skin glowing in the moonlight. Her clothes were tattered and stained, her long dark hair tangled and matted. But it was her eyes that truly terrified me, black as coal, and filled with an otherworldly hunger. "Thank you for stopping," she said, her voice a raspy whisper. "I've been waiting for so long." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet in my haste to get back to the truck. As I scrambled into the cab and locked the doors, I could see her in my side mirror, slowly walking towards me with an unnatural, jerky gait. My hands shook as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I floored the accelerator, my tires squealing as I pulled back onto the highway. For miles, I drove in a panic, constantly checking my mirrors for any sign of pursuit. But the road behind me remained empty. Just as I was starting to calm down, convinced I had imagined the whole thing, my CB radio crackled to life. "Hey there, driver," a gruff voice called out. "You okay? You just blew past me like a bat out of hell." I hesitated before responding, not sure if I should share my experience. But I needed to warn someone, anyone, about what I had seen. I saw something back there, I stammered. A woman. But she wasn't. She couldn't have been. Real? The voice finished for me. There was a long pause before he continued. "You're not the first to see her, you know. That stretch of road has a history." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Legend has it that decades ago, a young woman was murdered by a trucker she'd hitched a ride with. They never found her body, but folks say her spirit still haunts that stretch of highway, looking for revenge on any driver who stops to help her." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. But why did I hear her voice coming from my trailer? The other driver's response sent a chill down my spine. "That's how she lures you in. Makes you think someone needs help. But once you open those doors..." Well, let's just say not everyone makes it back to their cab. As if on cue, my radio erupted in a burst of static. Through the white noise, I could barely make out a familiar whisper. "Why did you leave me behind?" I slammed my hand down on the radio, silencing it. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. For the next 100 miles, I drove in silence, too afraid to turn the radio back on. Every shadow on the road seemed to move. Every reflection in my mirrors looked like her face. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I finally allowed myself to relax a little. Whatever I had encountered back there, surely it couldn't follow me into the daylight. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, barely noticeable over the familiar scents of diesel and leather. But as the miles rolled by, it grew stronger. The unmistakable stench of rot and decay, seeping into the cab from somewhere behind me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I realized the truth. Whatever had happened back on that lonely stretch of Route 66, it wasn't over. Something had followed me. Something was in my trailer. And we still had a long way to go before Los Angeles. I considered pulling over, calling for help. But the memory of those cold black eyes kept me going. What if opening the trailer doors again only made things worse? So I kept driving, the putrid smell growing stronger with each passing mile. Every now and then, I'd hear something, a scratch, a thump, a whispered word, coming from the back of the trailer. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Just fatigue and an overactive imagination, fueled by too many late-night horror movies and trucker ghost stories. But deep down, I knew better. Whatever was back there, it was real. And it was waiting. I passed a sign indicating Los Angeles was only 100 miles away. Under normal circumstances, I'd be relieved to see the end of my journey approaching. But now, all I could think about was what would happen when I finally had to open those trailer doors again. The CB radio crackled to life once more, startling me out of my anxious thoughts. "Hey there, driver," a familiar voice called out. It was the same trucker from earlier. "Just wanted to check in. You make it through the night okay?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. I think something followed me," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause before the other driver responded. "Listen carefully," he said, his tone deadly serious. "Whatever you do, don't stop driving. Don't open that trailer. Just get to your destination and let the receiving team handle the unloading." "But what if no buts?" he interrupted. "Trust me on this. I've seen what happens when drivers try to confront these things alone. It never ends well." As if to emphasize his point, a loud bang echoed from the back of my trailer, causing me to swerve slightly. "What was that?" the other driver asked, concern evident in his voice. "Nothing," I lied, not wanting to alarm him further. "Just hit a pothole." "Right," he said, clearly not believing me. "Look, you're almost there. Just keep driving. And remember, no matter what you hear, no matter what you smell, don't open that trailer." The radio went silent, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the increasingly frequent noises from behind me. As I approached the outskirts of Los Angeles, the sounds from the trailer grew more insistent. Scratching, thumping, and what sounded disturbingly like whispers in a language I couldn't understand. The stench had become almost unbearable, seeping into every corner of the cab. My eyes watered, and I found myself fighting the urge to gag with every breath. I was so close now. Just a few more miles to the delivery depot. I could make it. I had to make it. That's when I saw her again. She was standing on the shoulder of the highway, her tattered clothes fluttering in the breeze. As I sped past, our eyes locked, and I saw a smile spread across her pale face. A smile that promised this was far from over. In my side mirror, I watched as she seemingly vanished into thin air. But I knew better now. She wasn't gone. She was waiting. In my trailer. In my mind. in the very air around me. As I pulled into the delivery depot, a sense of dread washed over me. The journey might be over, but something told me my nightmare was just beginning. The receiving team approached my truck, clipboards in hand, ready to start unloading. They had no idea what was waiting for them, no idea of the horror they were about to unleash. As they reached for the trailer doors, I wanted to scream, to warn them, but my voice caught in my throat. All I could do was watch, helpless, as they began to open the doors. The last thing I remember is the sound of metal scraping against metal as the doors swung wide, and a wave of fetid air washing over us all. What happened next? Well, that's a story for another time, if I survive long enough to tell it. The world came back into focus slowly, like a radio tuning in through layers of static. I found myself lying on the cold, hard ground of the delivery depot, my head throbbing and my senses overwhelmed by the acrid smell of smoke and something far worse. As I struggled to sit up, the scene before me made my blood run cold. The entire depot was in chaos. Overturned forklifts, scattered cargo, and worst of all, bodies. So many bodies. The receiving team, the other drivers, even the security guards, they all lay motionless, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. And everywhere I looked, there were dark, viscous puddles that I knew instinctively weren't oil or fuel. My truck stood in the center of it all, the trailer doors hanging open like a gaping maw. Whatever had been inside was now loose. I stumbled to my feet, fighting waves of nausea and disorientation. How long had I been out? Minutes? Hours? The sky above was an unnatural shade of crimson, as if the very heavens were bleeding. That's when I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. It was a chorus of whispers, countless voices speaking in unison in a language that no human throat should be able to produce. And it was coming from everywhere at once. I spun around, trying to locate the source, but the whispers seemed to shift and move, always just out of sight. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, taking on grotesque, impossible shapes before melting away. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. "Is anyone alive?" The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. Then, a single voice responded, the same raspy whisper I'd heard on the highway. "We're all alive here," it said, the words dripping with malice. "More alive than we've been in centuries." I turned slowly, already knowing what I'd see but dreading it all the same. There she stood, the woman from the road. But she wasn't alone anymore. Behind her were dozens, maybe hundreds of figures. Some looked like her, pale and ethereal. Others were more solid, but twisted and wrong in ways that defied description. What are you?" I managed to choke out. The woman's face split into a grin that was far too wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "We are the forgotten," she hissed. "The abandoned, the murdered and the damned. And you, dear trucker, have set us free." The horde behind her surged forward, and I ran. I ran like I've never run before, weaving through the maze of warehouses and parked trucks. The whispers followed me, sometimes right in my ear, sometimes echoing from far away. As I rounded a corner, I slammed into something solid and fell back. Looking up, I found myself face to face with one of the creatures. It might have been human once, but now its flesh was translucent, pulsing with an inner light that hurt to look at. "Your fear is delicious," it gurgled, reaching for me with elongated fingers. I scrambled backward, my hand closing around a piece of broken pipe. Without thinking, I swung it with all my might. The pipe passed right through the creature as if it were made of smoke, but to my shock, it let out an unearthly shriek and dissipated. Hope surged through me. They could be hurt. maybe even stopped. Armed with my makeshift weapon, I fought my way through the depot. Each encounter left me more terrified but also more determined. I wasn't going to die here, not like this. As I battled the supernatural horde, fragments of memory began to surface. Snippets of conversation overheard at truck stops and rest areas over the years. Whispered warnings about cursed stretches of highway and the dangers of picking up hitchhikers after midnight. I'd always dismissed them as urban legends, the kind of stories truckers tell to keep themselves awake on long hauls. But now, faced with the impossible, I realized there had been truth in those tales. A warning I should have heeded. Hours seemed to pass as I navigated the nightmare landscape the depot had become. The sky above never changed, that unnatural crimson glow casting everything in a bloody light. More than once, I found myself back where I started, as if the very layout of the place was shifting around me. Finally, exhausted and on the verge of collapse, I found myself back at my truck. The woman, the thing that had started all this, was perched on the hood, watching me with those coal black eyes. "You've put up quite a fight," she said, almost sounding impressed. "But surely you must realize it's futile. You can't stop what's already been set in motion. What do you want?" I demanded, raising my pipe despite knowing how useless it would be against her. She cocked her head to the side, an unnaturally wide smile spreading across her face. "Want? We want what was taken from us. Life, freedom, a chance to walk the earth again." She gestured around at the carnage. "And thanks to you, we have it." I didn't mean to, I protested weakly. "I was just trying to help." "Oh, we know," she purred. "Your kind always is. So eager to be the hero, to save the poor, helpless woman on the side of the road. It makes you such easy prey." As she spoke, the other entities began to materialize around us, forming a circle that cut off any chance of escape. I gripped my pipe tighter, knowing it was useless but unwilling to go down without a fight. "You have a choice now," the woman continued. "Join us willingly, become one of us, and experience power beyond your wildest dreams. Or resist, and we'll take you anyway, but the process will be significantly less pleasant." For a moment, I was tempted. The promise of power, of never being afraid again, was almost overwhelming. But then I thought of all the people I'd seen lying dead in the depot. All the future victims these things would claim if they weren't stopped. "Go to hell," I spat. The woman's smile fell away, replaced by a snarl of rage. "You first," she hissed. The horde surged forward, a mass of grasping hands and gnashing teeth. I swung my pipe wildly, connecting with some, passing harmlessly through others. Claws raked across my back, teeth sank into my arm. The pain was excruciating, but I fought on. Just when I thought it was over, when the weight of the supernatural attackers threatened to overwhelm me, I heard a new sound cutting through the chaos. A deep, resonant chant in a language I didn't recognize. The effect was immediate. The creatures recoiled, shrieking in pain and fury. I looked up to see a group of people entering the depot, led by a tall, elderly man in what looked like a trucker's uniform. He held an ancient, leather-bound book in one hand and some kind of amulet in the other. "Get behind me, son," he called out. "Quickly!" I didn't need to be told twice. I broke free from the creature's grasp and ran towards the newcomers. As soon as I crossed some invisible line, the attacks stopped. It was as if an unseen barrier separated us from the horde. Who are you?" I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. The old man glanced at me, a grim smile on his weathered face. "Let's just say we're the cleanup crew. We've been tracking these things for decades, trying to keep them contained. But thanks to you, we've finally got a chance to end this once and for all." As he spoke, the others in his group spread out, each taking up positions around the depot. They began to chant in unison, their voices rising and falling in an otherworldly rhythm. The woman who had started all this let out a bone-chilling scream of rage. "No. We won't go back. We won't be forgotten again." But her protests were in vain. As the chant grew louder, a swirling vortex of energy began to form in the center of the depot. It pulsed with an eerie, eldritch light, and I could feel its pull even from where I stood. One by one, the creatures were drawn into the vortex, their forms twisting and distorting as they were pulled in. They fought against it, clawing at the ground and anything else they could grab, but it was useless. The woman was the last to go. As she was dragged towards the portal, her eyes locked with mine one final time. "This isn't over," she snarled. "We'll be back. And next time, no one will be able to save you." With a final, ear-splitting shriek, she vanished into the vortex. The old man slammed his book shut, and the portal collapsed in on itself with a thunderous boom. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, slowly, the unnatural crimson faded from the sky, replaced by the normal colors of a Los Angeles sunset. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the depot lifted, leaving behind only the faint smell of ozone and the all-too-real evidence of the battle we'd just survived. The old man approached me, his expression a mix of sympathy and stern disapproval. "You've had quite a night, son," he said. "But I hope you've learned an important lesson." I nodded, still too shaken to speak. "The roads are more dangerous than most people realize," he continued. "Especially for folks like us who spend our lives on them. There are things out there, ancient and hungry things, that prey on the kindness of travelers." He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong for his age. "But remember this, as long as there are creatures like that out there, there will always be people like us to fight them, to keep the roads safe." As the adrenaline of the night began to fade, exhaustion hit me like a physical force. The old man must have noticed, because he guided me towards a waiting truck. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll take care of things here. And when you're ready..." Well, we could always use another set of eyes out there on the highways. As I climbed into the truck's cab, my mind reeling from everything that had happened, I realized that my life would never be the same. The world was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. But it was also filled with unexpected allies and hidden strengths I never knew I possessed. And as I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, I knew that whatever came next, I'd face it head on. After all, that's what truckers do. We keep moving forward, no matter what horrors the road might hold.